talk immigration now with our political panel. On the left, Brian Tyler Cohen, who hosts the podcast No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, averages over 200 million views a month on YouTube. And on the right, making her debut on The Story is legal and political strategist Katie Zachariah. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much. Welcome, Katie. Good to have you here for the first time. Ladies first, let's start with you. What do you think? Is ICE making cities safer or less safe?
I disagree with those people on the poll that say it's making it less safe. I emphatically and completely think that ICE is making our cities safer. What makes them dangerous and the presence of ICE is the violent rhetoric against the ICE agents. Democrat leadership spurring them on to go get out in the streets and fight them, calling ICE agents the Gestapo. That's Tim Walz said that about the ICE agents. That instills fear in people to go fight immigration officers that are doing their job. Let's backtrack. They wouldn't have to be doing this job had the border been sealed in the first place and proper immigration and border regulation were in place during the Biden and Kamala years.
What do you think? Less safe, more safe?
I think that it's not necessarily the rhetoric that's making this less safe. I think it's the fact that you have these inept, unqualified ICE agents who are shooting unarmed moms 3 times in the face because they wouldn't stop their car. I mean, it's crazy to think that the rhetoric, we heard from Jacob Frey, who is the mayor of Minneapolis, and he was saying, we're a community of peace. Don't take the bait, because we know that Donald Trump wants nothing more than to be a wartime president. And if he can't get it in Venezuela, if he can't get it in Panama, if he can't get it in Greenland, then he's going to send the military into American cities. He's tried to do it in the city that we're in right now, Los Angeles. He's tried to do it in Portland, tried to do it in Chicago, tried to do it in Washington, D.C., anywhere where he can incite violence, so he can feel like a wartime president, so he can justify these troop deployments. He's going to do. And this is just one more iteration of exactly that.
Katie, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I'm shaking my head. Renee Good drove into an officer with a car, which is a lethal use of force.
That's absolutely untrue.
Use a lethal, use of force.
The sad part about that is that
retaliatory lethal force.
The sad part of that is that
she drove her car. She hit the officer. It's I think debatable whether she was trying to hit the officer, but she did drive her car, and the officer appeared to be hit from at least some of the camera angles.
The sad part about that is that everybody can see with their own eyes, and so we can tell after having watched that footage. There were multiple gunshots where the officer, and according to the New York Times analysis of this, where we can all see, again, clear as day, that these gunshots went in her side mirror, in her side window. Her window was open. So there is no reason why this officer should have been using lethal force. We already know, by the way, that the officer should not have positioned himself in front of this car. But beyond all of that, when we hear from the right this idea that they're going to rewrite history and tell us not to believe our own lying eyes, it puts on full display the extent to which this is all being done in bad faith, all being done to justify this undue force.
Katie.
Lying eyes is watching an officer walk around the car and having Renee Good drive into him after he had already been dragged by another car 6 months earlier. And it is justifiable self-defense. A car can be a lethal weapon when used as such.
Right, and when used as such, and that's not how he was using it. And if this officer...
Let her finish her point.
And he used justifiable retaliatory lethal force against a woman who drove into him. And that is you're saying don't believe your lying eyes. I'm saying they're asking us to not believe our lying eyes in defense of the ICE agent. And again, I go back to my original point. ICE would not have to be there had the Biden-Harris administration followed the law, had they enforced border immigration in the first place. No country, no sovereign country can exist without border regulation. We had over 10 million border encounters during Biden and Harris. That's just border encounters, likely 17 million or more illegal immigrants, people that came in unchecked. And as a mom, if I'm Renee Good and I have ICE telling me to get out of my car, I'm going to get out of my car. I am not going to put my kids at risk, leave them motherless, and hit an ICE agent and create chaos. I think that was so irresponsible, and I'm in much disagreement with you.
But to the point about, could there be more done to not create these situations? Because federal immigration enforcement wants to work with a lot of these Democratic officials in sanctuary cities and say, let us honor ICE detainers. Let us go into the prisons. Let us work with you so we can target the worst people and not have to go into the streets. But in a lot of cases, a lot of these cities, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, others are saying, no, we won't work with you at all. I mean, could that create a situation where there's we have a more safe situation.
The reality is that nothing justifies the force that we're seeing right now at the hands of these ICE agents. Look, I mean, if you're asking whether it would be easier if everybody just kind of laid down and allowed ICE to infiltrate the cities and do whatever they want to do, of course, but that's not what ICE is looking to do. ICE is looking to incite as much violence, as much pandemonium as they can, so that they can use that as justification to ramp up their operations. We know that these people, again, Donald Trump wants nothing more than to be a wartime president. Greg Bovino wants nothing more than to ramp up these operations. They revel in the violence, the chaos, the dysfunction that they're creating right now. There is no de-escalation happening in any of these cities. There was no de-escalation happening in LA, in Portland, in Chicago, in DC, and there's not de-escalation happening here, as you see the images beside me on the screen in Minneapolis.
I mean, do you think, Katie, that, what do you say to the argument that chaos is the point? That really what Stephen Miller and folks in the Trump administration want is for people to self-deport. And so having these images of ICE looking scary is kind of the point, so that it encourages people to get out on their own, which is actually cheaper.
Yes, and they want self-deportation. If they didn't have to send ICE in or go into any of these cities, I don't believe that they would. If everyone decided to self-deport, and I want to give a hypothetical scenario to your point. If Democrat mayors, and Muriel Bowser in Washington, D.C. actually really paired up in support of the National Guard to bring crime down in our city. Now, I know that's different from ICE, but she said, we're going to support the Trump administration because I care about my city and I want crime to go down. If, for instance, Karen Bass said, we want to see ICE, we want to see less ICE, and so therefore I'm going to encourage people to self-deport. I'm going to encourage people to listen to the authorities, to listen to the federal authorities that are here and in complete agreement and with the support of the supremacy clause of the Constitution based on federal law. I'm going to support this and encourage these people to exit on their own because they shouldn't have been here in the first place. That would de-escalate. If we had Tim Walz not calling them the Gestapo, that would de-escalate a situation. If they knew they didn't have to go into this marijuana farm right up the road in California and not have people coming after them and not be on the defensive, if these people would walk out and say, here are our papers, or here not, or I'm going to surrender, I'm here illegally, and are told by Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass and other governors, this would de-escalate the situation.
First of all, if you don't want to be called the Gestapo, do not shoot unarmed moms of 3 in their cars. Second of all, if this is really about crime, how does that answer the question of native-born populations commit crimes at higher rates than immigrant populations? If this is truly about crime.
National Guard is in Chicago. For what? Did he say, I want the National Guard in Chicago to only for illegal immigrants? No. Why did the National Guard go to Washington, D.C.? Why? Because it was a dangerous city that was not being run well, and it had.
We're not talking about that though. If you're sending ICE, if you're sending ICE into Minneapolis right now,
and gun violence rates are down across the country because of these deportations and
of these deportations. Again, immigrant populations commit crimes at lower rates than native-born populations. So again, the question remains: if this is actually about crime, how do you answer for the fact that it's not immigrants who are committing crimes at higher rates than native-born Americans?
Last word, because we're out of time. Go ahead.
Immigrants, illegal immigrants, and native population. 3 different categories. You are lumping in illegal immigrants and regular immigrants, which I don't think is a fair combination.
Undocumented immigrants and immigrants who are documented both commit crimes at lower rates than native-born Americans.
Although there's some on the right who would say being here in the first place is a crime if you don't have papers. But that's a whole other debate. Katie, Brian, thank you both for this debate. We appreciate it. It's one that a lot of people are having, and we appreciate being able to do so in a civil way right now. That's the only way we're going to get through this, is we actually talk to each other.